Imagine, if you will, a mystery. Except this mystery is a little bit strange. Don't trust what you see, don't trust what you're told. Don't even blink, or you might miss that vital clue. This is not the world you're used to. Can you figure out what's really going on? Meet Mr. and Mrs. Maximoff. Except, you've already met, haven't you? Didn't you see them in the movies? Weren't they part of, what was it, the biggest cinema event in recent memory? And didn't one of them die? So how is it they're both here? By all appearances, this is an ordinary 1950s sitcom. Or is it the 60s? The 70s? Either way, it's not the setting we normally find them. And it seems they, too, have realised this is strange. There are pieces of this puzzle that don't quite fit. Something below the surface, something trying to get in, or something preventing them from getting out. Something the neighbours seem to know, but can't say. Something hidden behind the veneer of studio-lit suburbia. Something is wrong with this world. And it's up to our favourite newlyweds to figure out what. Westview, New Jersey is a town which doesn't exist. Nobody nearby has ever heard of it. People with relatives there don't remember knowing them. It's like the town itself doesn't want people to set foot inside. And if anyone does. Intelligence agency SWORD has pointed all their fancy gadgets at the town with no results. But plug in an old TV and they get this. A 1950s sitcom, with all the residents of Westview in the cast, not to mention 2 Avengers and one of SWORD's own agents. Any attempts to communicate with the people inside either fails or is cut out of the show.
Someone is censoring the broadcast.
Everything and everyone that crosses the border gets rewritten. Everyone inside is forced to play a part. And if SWORD wants to save the people trapped in Westview, they'll need to figure out who is pulling the strings. It doesn't take a detective to spot these 2 mysteries are actually the same mystery, just told from different perspectives. One from the inside looking out, the other from the outside looking in. Both are perfectly fine ways to frame a mystery. But what doesn't work is trying to look in both directions at the same time. Look, I don't enjoy being the guy who dunks on the popular thing.
Sure, Jan.
I want to play fair, and it's pretty clear WandaVision wasn't made for me. I'm mostly ambivalent about the MCU, and that's not WandaVision's fault. Why should I expect one TV series to do the work an entire film franchise has already failed to accomplish with me? To its credit, WandaVision features some genuinely exceptional performances, particularly from Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany, and Kathryn Hahn is a pure delight. And it's creative filmmaking. The way the show uses the medium and genre conventions as part of its storytelling is ingenious. I only wish there were more of it. And I know lots of people connected with the show emotionally, particularly for its portrayal of grief. I don't want to take that away from anyone just because it didn't land with me. However, my biggest criticism of WandaVision is the way it structures its central mystery. Shouldn't that be the backbone of the whole thing? The show presents us with something that cannot be explained, and promises, if only we keep watching, it will be explained. That's a mystery. But WandaVision isn't put together in the way a mystery should be. So I thought we could take this opportunity to talk about how mysteries work. There's an idea in classic mystery fiction commonly referred to as fair play. A mystery is considered fair if it's possible for the audience to solve the mystery before the plot does. This idea most commonly applies to classic whodunits, which treat their mysteries as a sort of game. It's a puzzle with a solution. The audience is invited to speculate, while the author attempts to outwit them. However, I'd argue fair play is about more than treating the plot as a game. I suspect most mystery readers don't actually try all that hard to solve the puzzle, because that's not what makes a mystery enjoyable. Nor is fair play about trying to fool your audience. It's actually pretty easy to write something nobody could see coming.
And the murderer was none other than this cyborg cat from the future. And I do it again!
Fair play is about creating a specific kind of catharsis, that aha moment. For a mystery to be truly satisfying, it needs to make complete sense. The audience must have been given enough information that when they hear the solution, it's clearly the one and only explanation to every question that's been posed. Fair play is less, "Ha, fancy that," and more, "Oh, of course." If you look up fair play, you'll probably find a picture of Ronald Knox. He was a detective story writer during the 1920s and 30s, the so-called golden age of detective fiction. He is perhaps best known for his 10 Commandments, a list of rules every good detective story should abide by. He was also a priest, so I imagine 10 is an arbitrary number. Now, these rules are a product of their time. Okay, with this one, Knox elaborates that it refers to specific yellow peril stereotypes that were abundant at the time. It doesn't really have much to do with structuring mysteries, so let's just move on. In general, I resent the idea of applying strict rules to fiction, because there's always an exception that works just fine. Nevertheless, Knox's rules do a reasonable job of codifying this idea of fair play. Most of these rules are about prohibiting methods of concealing information that might be unsportsmanlike, or giving the detective an unfair advantage, relying on inventions the audience won't be familiar with, failing to introduce the murderer, or misrepresenting them entirely, and using gimmicks that are just unlikely. But WandaVision is not a traditional mystery. Is it really fair to hold it to Knox's standard? The show features both twins and doubles, but that doesn't really factor into the mystery, so you can't really call this unfair. More importantly, it's pure fantasy. It's got magic and robots. You can't penalise it for not operating on realistic logic. It never pretended otherwise. Nevertheless, I'd say the spirit of this rule still applies. In this case, what Knox is criticising is solving an impossible problem with an impossible solution.
And the murderer was able to enter the locked room by painting a door on the wall and walking through it.
This can feel like a cheat. Once literal magic is on the table, what can't you explain?
Well, whenever you notice something like that, a wizard did it.
That said, most fantasy stories operate on a form of logic. The magic needs rules so we understand what the characters are capable of and what they aren't. So long as we understand those rules, there's no reason why a fantasy story can't adhere to some standard of fair play. Minority Report, The Others, Arrival, The Sixth Sense, Fight Club, Get Out, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? These all involve elements not entirely rooted in reality. They also all end in a big reveal, like a mystery does. The reason we remember them so well is not because the solutions are surprising, but because they are fair. Any invented logic the solutions require has already been explained organically throughout the plot. The mysteries have enough clear clues that you might suspect what's really going on before the end. And even if they do surprise you, they work by pointing out what you noticed without noticing. It's actually not uncommon for supernatural stories to structure themselves like a mystery, opening with a question and building to an aha moment. It creates intrigue, it makes exposition engaging, it focuses the plot on the supernatural element whilst allowing a more gradual introduction of unfamiliar concepts. WandaVision does all of these things. But, does it play fair? For the first 3 episodes, WandaVision presents itself as a genuine sitcom. It's largely played straight, to the point it's unclear what else we're meant to get from these episodes. It's a little surprising, therefore, that episode 4 breaks this format and explains exactly what's going on in specific detail. Westview has been imprisoned inside a sitcom reality, and Wanda is behind the whole thing.
It's all Wanda.
So how fair is this? Knox's 8th rule prohibits outright withholding clues. Before the solution, the audience must have all the information the detective has. So, what information has WandaVision given us? Well, there have been a number of clearly telegraphed clues. Wanda and Vision don't remember anything before Westview. Vision uses his superpowers and his boss doesn't notice. There's this shot of somebody watching the sitcom. Wanda finds this full-colour helicopter. A voice speaks to Wanda through a radio. There's this creepy beekeeper that comes out of the sewers. Whenever they acknowledge the weirdness, it's edited out. Other characters see superpowers and don't bat an eye. The neighbours seem to know something but can't say it. Geraldine knows classified information about Ultron, and this symbol with a sword keeps cropping up. Seems like this should be enough, right? Except, what have we actually learned? Half of these clues are telling us everyone here is under some form of mind control. It's okay to reinforce that point, but none of these examples give much indication, or implication, about how or why this is happening. The other half are telling us about SWORD, the government agency investigating from the outside. But, again, these don't give us much information. The sword symbol means nothing unless you've read the comics. Otherwise, there's no clue that SWORD is a government agency, or that they're investigating the anomaly rather than being responsible for it. 4 of these turn out to be SWORD's attempts to infiltrate the anomaly, which have been rewritten by crossing the border. But we weren't even told there was a border. How are we to know the town existed somewhere in the real world and wasn't a simulation or a dream? I'd say clue 3 suggests the latter. And the logic of these clues makes more sense in the opposite direction. Knowing how the anomaly works, I can accept a man in a hazmat suit might become a creepy beekeeper. But show me the beekeeper first, and there's no connection to the man in the hazmat suit. Altogether, these clues do not provide enough information to support the big reveal. Knox's first rule stipulates the culprit must not only be somebody the audience has already met, but also must not be somebody whose thoughts the audience has been allowed to follow. The second part is trickier to nail down. Knox clarifies by describing an attitude of mystification. If the culprit is shown to behave, think, and feel like an innocent person, then it would be unfair to tell us that person is guilty. Only one of these clues points to Wanda as the true culprit behind the anomaly. Before the beekeeper is retconned out of existence, she says,
No.
And that's the clearest indication, which is hardly conclusive. Wanda doesn't appear to notice any of the other retcons, so why should we think she's aware of this one, let alone responsible for it? We can also infer that it was she who broke the radio, but again, she's not self-aware. Wanda confides in Vision about what happened as if she's just as mind-controlled as everyone else.
Something strange happened with Dottie.
SWORD's message on the radio also supports the idea that she's a victim.
Wanda! Who's doing this to you, Wanda?
Because, at this point, she is. We're later told her actions were initially subconscious, which rings true for these first 3 episodes. And, okay, this may be justified by her emotional state, or it may work to partially exonerate her for her crimes, but at this stage of the mystery, it only serves to misdirect us from the truth, disguising Wanda's guilt by telling us she's innocent. Knox's 4th rule prohibits devices the audience cannot be expected to be familiar with, either because they require specialist knowledge, or because they're fictional inventions. If a clue requires a lengthy explanation after the solution, that is, as Knox says, not cricket. The abilities the anomaly relies upon, warping reality, mind control en masse, creating new life, are things we've never seen Wanda do before. Yes, later on we find out she's undergoing this magical awakening as the Scarlet Witch, and yes, I know these are things that are supported by the comics. But at this stage of the mystery, we do not know this. It is only explained after the reveal. And this explanation introduces an entirely new fantasy logic. Obviously, superpowers are hardly new in the MCU, but the justifications have always skewed more sci-fi. Doctor Strange has his sorcery, but that's linked to astral planes and mysticism. Straight-up witches with this kind of unlimited power are entirely new territory. So far as we knew before the solution, this was impossible. So this mystery is not remotely fair. These clues exist more to confuse than elucidate, to remind us of the strangeness that gives purpose to the sitcom we've been made to sit through. But why bother burying the lead quite so deeply for these first 3 episodes, only to blast it out of the ground before we finished digging? Well, I can see what they were trying to do, because this style of supernatural mystery has worked before.
How do you feel now?
Better.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you still feel that, quote, you have power over things and can control things with your mind?
David isn't well. He hears voices. He sees things that aren't there. He believes he can control things with his mind. Which is why he's in a mental hospital. Or he was. Until he was rescued by a group of mutant rebels who tell him his mental illness is actually his superpower.
You're not schizophrenic. You have powers. The things you see are real.
To prove this, they enter David's memories. Here they discover he has the power to rewrite the world around him. However, there are details of his memory that seem unlikely, incomplete, entirely untrue, and even dangerous. Has David done this to himself, or has something done this to him? If David can rewrite reality, how can he trust his experiences are real? Legion is a mystery told from the inside. The mystery is present from the beginning, but it's not immediately obvious what it is. The characters investigate without knowing the real question they're trying to answer. And there's no detective to speak of. Maybe David, but he doesn't contribute much to the investigation. He's more like the murder victim. Instead, the detective is the audience themselves. And, in a way, all the lead characters are Watsons. Knox's 9th rule mentions the Watson archetype, stipulating they must be stupider than the average reader. This is not to say Legion's characters are morons. They each have specialist skills or experience that make them indispensable to the investigation. But none of them are ahead of the audience. Any information they have, we have, but only we have all the information. Nevertheless, our Watsons help us to voice all the questions and theories we should be considering. Repeatedly, they present us with reasonable hypotheses, only to revise them when presented with new information.
You think you can control things with your mind?
I did at one point, but they help with that.
You have powers. The things you see are real.
Stop fighting me.
I'm not.
Yes, this was you. There was something you didn't want us to see.
Maybe he's hidden his real memories behind fake ones.
None of these is entirely correct, and we are primed to treat them with suspicion. But still, each one helps us move closer to the truth. Legion has a reputation for being confusing, and that's the point. Nevertheless, it is never careless. It is very, very controlled with what information the audience has, when they have it, and how they're encouraged to interpret it. When the solution is revealed, it makes sense with everything we've seen. The mystery treats us entirely fair. WandaVision seems to be going for a similar mood. Showrunner Jack Schaefer specifically cited Legion as an influence, and that can be keenly felt in these first 3 episodes. The story opens in media res, in a very literal sense at least, throwing us into the sitcom reality without explanation. Like Legion, it's not upfront about what the mystery even is, and there's no detective either. The format is specifically designed to present clues to the audience and not the characters. However, unlike Legion, there are no Watsons to guide us. None of the characters accumulate information or understanding. This isn't wrong per se, the mind control is a facet of the mystery, but we're not making much progress towards answering any questions. And we could have had the perfect Watson in Vision. Later on in the series, he grows suspicious of Wanda and begins to investigate for himself. But by then, he's not learning anything we don't already know. Imagine how compelling it would have been if we were making Vision's discoveries alongside him. How intriguing these mindless human puppets would be if we didn't already know they were at the limits of Wanda's power. How thrilling finding the barrier at the edge of town would be if we didn't already know what Vision would find on the other side. When Agnes tells him he's dead, Vision barely reacts.
Because you are?
Because I'm what?
Dead. Dead. Dead! Dead!
The show isn't interested in what he thinks about this, because it's nothing the audience doesn't already know. The solution in episode 4 arrives too early. We don't have enough information for it to be fair, and it spoils the rest of the investigation. It's a very peculiar choice. I don't know what happened during development, but I can imagine this choice was made out of concern for losing their audience. And it's a reasonable concern. We weren't really getting anywhere, were we? How are you supposed to investigate a mystery if none of the characters are fully aware it's even happening? Well, their solution was to reintroduce that mystery in a different style. Episode 4 works like any traditional whodunit. We meet our detective, who is called to investigate a mystery. We meet our Watsons, people with relevant skills for our detective to mull over the clues with. They gather evidence, they table questions, and they find out what's really going on. The trouble is, by the time they get to Westview, there's nothing left to investigate. This episode is told in flashback. It's the first 3 episodes again, just told from S.W.O.R.D's perspective. They may be baffled by the anomaly, but we already know what's going on inside. When Monica enters the sitcom world, they don't show us what she experiences because we've already seen what happens to her. Instead, she just drops out of the story for a bit. And each time S.W.O.R.D attempts to breach the anomaly, we can guess what will happen because we've seen that too. It's not introducing us to the mystery, it's solving it. We've been gathered in the parlour room, yet it's presented like we're seeing the scene of the crime. As a result, S.W.O.R.D has nothing to do. Most of their investigation is just busy work. They collate the real identities of all the cast members, but aside from letting us know they're real people, none of this is important information. We don't even know which resident of Westview is the missing person which drew Agent Wu to the anomaly in the first place. That plot point is entirely forgotten about. Like any good team of Watsons, S.W.O.R.D spends a lot of time raising questions.
Why is it that you have an awareness of Westview? Or me, for that matter.
Why'd you colorize it?
I didn't.
But they don't find answers to any of them. Okay, there are reasonable answers we, the audience, can infer. The hexagonal motif, for instance, boils down to little more than a pun on the word hex. However, by drawing our attention to these questions, it's telling us they are important. But even a red herring needs to be properly explained, or it'll continue to be conspicuous. At least our detective makes deductions. Well, she makes one.
You had a bulletproof vest on when you went inside, didn't you?
It's not an illusion. Wanda is rewriting reality.
Apart from this, nothing S.W.O.R.D learns is a result of their own investigative abilities. They reveal the nature of the anomaly to us, but only by virtue of where they're standing. Darcy discovers the sitcom by plugging a TV into the aux port, but that's all technobabble. It isn't meant to be understood beyond a surface level. Monica discovers Wanda is behind the mind control, but only because she prodded the weird thing and Wanda threw her across the lawn.
It's Wanda.
It's all Wanda.
Monica never has a moment of inspiration that solves the mystery. The plot solves it for her. And once it does, she, and S.W.O.R.D. in general, become a bit pointless. They spend hardly any time watching the sitcom anymore. They're not really concerned about the new mysteries popping up inside the anomaly. They're more focused on departmental politics and the ethics of killing Wanda to save her victims. Which isn't inherently bad, it just doesn't really go anywhere. Like the lunar lander they got to cross the barrier, which fails to cross the barrier. I suspect the only reason they introduced that at all is to put Monica in a cool costume for the rest of the series. They give Monica superpowers too, because that's how she is in the comics. But all she really achieves with them is stopping a bullet from hitting a child, who can also stop bullets. Look at this shot, it was never going to hit anyone anyway. You could take S.W.O.R.D. out of the story entirely, and you wouldn't lose very much. Now, I can understand why WandaVision pivoted to this style. It's pretty tried and tested. Shows like The X-Files, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and Stranger Things all dabble in paranormal mystery. But if WandaVision had wanted to do this style of mystery properly, there's one example that might have been the perfect starting point.
The library. So big it doesn't need a name. Just a great big the.
The Doctor and Donna travel to a library the size of a planet, but are surprised to discover it's completely abandoned.
Maybe everyone's really, really quiet.
Yeah, maybe. But they'd still show up on the system.
A century ago, the library was attacked by a swarm of carnivorous shadows, and the security systems quarantined the planet. But what happened to the people inside? There are no bodies, just this confusing message.
4,022 saved, no survivors.
How come 4,022 people have been saved if there were no survivors?
This mystery is solved on two fronts. The first is very traditional. The Doctor collects information until a moment of inspiration hits and he explains what it is we've already seen.
It didn't mean saved, it literally meant saved!
At the same time, Donna discovers the solution by experiencing it firsthand. The Doctor attempts to teleport her to safety, but instead, she wakes up in a dream world, with a new domestic life, a husband, a family, and no memory of the library. But, gradually, she realizes something isn't quite right.
The world is wrong.
What?
Here's the solution. When the shadows attacked, the central computer attempted to teleport everyone to safety, but with nowhere to send them, it saved their digital selves to its hard drive, creating a fantasy world for them to live in. This solution is fair, because the details, digital people, the massive hard drive, life inside a simulation, are all alluded to organically throughout the plot, just like a whodunit. This style of mystery is limiting in some ways. Since the characters are aware of the mystery, you can't be as indirect about it, the way Legion is. You have to begin in a state of relative normality, and pull your characters into the strangeness. Nevertheless, it is more accessible. When the characters encounter something strange, they can react appropriately, acknowledging it, discussing it, solving it at the same time the audience is. It's always focused on the mystery, and it's always making progress towards the solution. WandaVision could have been structured in a similar way, and still achieved all the same things. When S.W.O.R.D. begins investigating, we could have learned about the anomaly alongside them. When Monica is taken inside the sitcom world, we could have experienced it with her, just as we did with Donna and her dream world. And all the gimmicks WandaVision does with media conventions, Silence in the Library does that too. In Donna's fantasy, she becomes aware of scene transitions.
Should we go down to the river?
You said river, and suddenly we're feeding ducks.
Silence in the Library also begins in media res. It opens with the computer's perspective, except it's presented as an ordinary little girl who dreams of the library. It creates intrigue through confusion, just like Legion does. But only for the teaser, not 3 episodes of pointless build. Either style of mystery can work. They can even borrow elements from the other. But you can't introduce us to the same mystery twice. And you can't make the audience your detective if there's already a detective in the story. That just gives you a bad detective getting in the way of the real investigation. That's why there's not enough for Sword to do. All the real work is already being done in the scenes with Wanda and Vision. They spoil Sword's mystery just as much as Sword spoils theirs. You can tell the story from Sword's perspective, or you can tell it from Wanda and Vision's perspective. But the two styles are not compatible. You can't do both. So, after episode 4, we know Wanda is the culprit. There's still the pesky business of how and why, but these questions are answered at length in episode 8. Wanda's powers have surged because she's becoming the Scarlet Witch, a reference to the comics, but an entirely new concept in the MCU. To cope with her grief, Wanda made a fantasy of domestic bliss. It's a sitcom because Wanda was obsessed with sitcoms as a child, a detail that has never been mentioned before. I don't mind this as a retcon, I mean, it's not like this detail would have been relevant in any of the films, but for the mystery to play fair, it should have been referenced before the reveal. Aside from all that, the mystery is basically done. By combining these two styles, they've spoiled both. So to keep that sense of mystery going, the latter half of the series introduces secondary mysteries. These don't affect the main mystery of Wanda and the anomaly, besides suggesting the solution we've seen might not be the correct one. But in the end, no, the solution is correct. These new mysteries are just smoke and mirrors to beat out whatever intrigue hasn't already been ruined. The first new mystery is Pietro, Wanda's dead brother who knocks on the door one night. Except he's not played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, who played him in Age of Ultron. He's played by Evan Peters, who's famous for playing a different interpretation of the same character in Fox's X-Men franchise. Various rights issues have meant X-Men has always been separate from the MCU, so it's actually kind of strange to see him here. It's a fun idea, but only in the metatext. For Wanda, it would have been more impactful if he actually were played by Taylor Johnson and not a complete stranger. Either way, this goes nowhere. Pietro turns out to be an imposter, because what else could he have been? Also, isn't this the sort of thing Sword should have been able to figure out? We know they have facial recognition software which identifies Westview residents. Pop Pietro through the software and ping! Oh, it's actually Ralph. But that would spoil the intrigue now, wouldn't it? The second new mystery is everybody's favourite Wicked Witch, Agatha Harkness. Wanda's nosy neighbour Agnes turns out to be a centuries-old witch named Agatha. She's not under Wanda's spell, and she never was. She came here to steal Wanda's power for herself. I want to like this twist, I really do. Catherine Hahn is having such a great time as this character, and to reveal a twist with a musical number just sings to my little gay heart. But it doesn't mean anything. When the song says it was Agatha all along, what was Agatha? What did she do exactly? She says she wanted to wake Wanda from her fantasy and figure out how she achieved such a tremendous feat of magic.
I was so patient, waiting for you to reveal your true self. I tried to be gentle, to nudge you awake from this ridiculous fantasy.
And the song shows us all the ways she tried to do this. She set the rabbit loose at their magic show, but what difference did that make? She asked Wanda if she felt she deserved all her problems, but what did that achieve? She bewitched Herb to make him reveal the truth to Vision, but interrupted him before he could say anything important. She acted weird at the edge of town, but so did everyone else there. Vision was going to the edge either way, he didn't even react when she told him he was dead. She created the fake Pietro, which was marginally effective. It nearly got some information out of Wanda, but didn't. And she killed the dog, which I guess was a test to see how Wanda could raise the dead. But that also didn't work. There are other hints to her agenda, I suppose. She manipulates Wanda away from Monica, I guess because she wants to keep the anomaly going. She wears a witch costume for Halloween, but that's theming, not evidence. There's this time she breaks character.
Do you want me to take that again?
Which prompts Vision's suspicions of Wanda. But she's not the only resident to behave like this. In fact, her impression of being under a spell is so convincing, it actually counts as evidence against her true agenda. Repeatedly, Agnes appears as if summoned, with precisely the thing Wanda needs. Vision uses his mind powers to temporarily free her from Wanda's spell, and it works. And again, Sword knows the identities of all Westview residents, yet they never clock that Agatha isn't one of them. Looking closely at her file on the corkboard, you can see her real identity is missing, yet nobody remarks on this. And for someone trying to make Wanda aware of what she's doing, Agatha has this incredible knack for interrupting Wanda whenever she's close to acknowledging the truth. The song makes Agatha out to be the mastermind behind the whole thing, but she isn't. It's still Wanda's illusion, it's still Wanda's fault. Everything Agatha did changes none of that. She's not the puppet master, she's just there to provide exposition and give Wanda somebody to shoot lasers at the end. Or did the song mean Agnes was Agatha all along? Was the big reveal about who she is rather than what she did? Well, I'm sorry, but I don't know Agatha.
Die kenne ich nicht.
As I've already mentioned, references to the comics don't work as clues. It's information some of the audience doesn't have, so Agnes's true identity is meaningless to them. And even to those who do know Agatha, they don't know this version of her. She doesn't actually bear much similarity to the comics. Telling us Agnes was Agatha all along isn't a revelation, it's just new information. But, of course, if they mentioned Agatha's real name, or made a genuine reference to her ahead of the reveal, those who are familiar with the comics would make the connection, wouldn't they? And they'd spoil it for everyone else. So this mystery is unfair by design, to remove any risk of anyone figuring it out. Surprising an audience is easy, you just don't tell them anything.
And you fools never suspected a thing.
So, you're probably wondering why I've gathered you all here today. Isn't this a bit much? Not everything has to be on Agatha Christie's level. Can't we just enjoy WandaVision as a fun story about magic and robots and sitcoms? Why am I thinking so hard about this? Well, to that I say, because they told me to. Like any good mystery, they opened their story with a question. And it's a broad question, simply, what's going on here then? They were cagey about information. They drew our attention to the minutiae and distracted us with stories that weren't the real story. All of which invites scrutiny. They wanted us to speculate about these things, which people did. In the 7 weeks between premiere and finale, social media was awash with intense theory crafting, often to absurd levels of detail. And this is precisely the sort of engagement Marvel wanted. It's no accident. So, it's a bit of a kick in the teeth they didn't treat us fair. Then again, maybe it was foolish of me to expect Marvel to do something other than what Marvel does best. A few fun ideas, a few familiar faces, a few flashy fight scenes, and that's a square Marvel meal. It's not meant to be challenging, it's meant to be a comfort. And though it was a little too old hat for my taste, WandaVision is one of the more out there things Marvel has produced. I suspect that's a big factor in its popularity. It probably bodes well that Marvel have been rewarded for being a little experimental. Nevertheless, I am concerned there seems to be a limit to how far they can stray from the Marvel formula. For whatever reason, 3 episodes was all they were allowed before they snapped back to something more traditional. I'd hardly be the first to accuse Marvel of becoming homogenous, but if this is Marvel trying to break the mold, it leaves a lot to be desired. And with the way Marvel dominates the cultural landscape, their next TV show dropping before I've even finished writing the script about this one, makes me worry that WandaVision has set the standard for what supernatural mysteries are like now. Okay, that's a bit dramatic. Legion only finished airing 2 years ago, Marvel can't have eroded the bedrock of Western entertainment already. But it is worth noting that when Ronald Knox devised his 10 Commandments, he was writing about stories that were as mainstream as Marvel is now, and the most celebrated authors from this golden age abided by these rules. Not always by the letter, but certainly by their intent. So, I guess what I'm really saying is this. There is a better standard of supernatural mystery out there, and Marvel should be held to the same standard. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. You can support the channel via my Patreon at patreon.com/JamesWoodall. I also have a Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/JamesWoodall. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching.